Hello world of YouTube, and welcome to another episode of Redacted, the show where every album has a story. Now, similarly to last month's, this month's is another newer idea, but one that I think has a bit more going on than the simplicity that was my short and sweet Redacted. It's a look at a record that has a vision and had a pretty solid execution, but considering they did have a wealth of B-sides for this era that I wasn't even aware of until recently, I felt the need to tackle it, considering it's also a record that kind of has a bit of a stigma around it comparatively to the record that it was following up. Also, considering this band is dropping an album next month, I figured it'd be apropos to talk about them on this show once again. It is my third time talking about the British rock band Bloc Party, and it is going to be a look at their still solid, if not still not looked fondly upon enough, sophomore outing from 2007, A Weekend in the City.
Now is not the time for liberal so I go hunting for witches.
Now, I've always been a pretty avid defender of this album. I still, for the life of me, do not understand why this record was maligned so intensely. In a post-Silent Alarm world, I don't know if people were trying to pigeonhole this band and they didn't like them deviating their lyrical tapestries in tandem with expanding their sonics, but I think them expanding their sonics in the way they did on here with the incorporation of electronic ideas suits their brand of like dance-inspired post-punk, and I think it is bold for them to want to not only sort of expand on their more romantic and relationship-driven lyrics from Silent Alarm, while also sort of going bigger and thinking bigger, thinking worldly, or at least culturally. I think that it could have been a really great sort of melding of the two. However, I do think, and one of my bigger issues with the album, especially as time has gone on, and especially after really focusing on it for this show, is that I think there's just an imbalance. And like the more broader worldly themes very much give way by the end of the album's track listing to the band focusing more on the relationship stuff. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad idea, but I think the execution wasn't the smoothest. And so my goal today was to fix that. However, this wasn't even going to be a concept until I realized and found earlier this year that a couple of years ago, the band dropped all of the B-sides to this era in an album's length sort of package on DSPs. And so, after spending time with those and this record again, I figured I'd try to meld them two a little more smoothly. My version is a little bit longer, a la what I did with like Standing on the Shoulders of Giants and Humbug and the like. It stands at 15 tracks and an hour and 6 minutes in length. Let's go ahead and cut the preamble off here, show off the track listing before breaking it down track by track now.
I go hunting for witches as I'm going to roll. And I will wait. And memories of the past. We can't be hurt. We can't be hurt. Now you can't keep a job and you can't keep a wife. What a horrible mess you're gonna make of your life. Oh, how parents they suffer the love. I want it back. There is no reason to pretend. We were hoping for some romance. Took the U-Bahn to the East Side Gallery. In every headline, we are reminded this world is crowded. Give us our voice. I can be cruel.
like A Song for Clay. Clearly, it's in my version as well. I just think it's a better centerpiece than it is a better start for this album. While it maybe has some more like traditional or like what Bloc Party started off as the Sonics, I think just cold plunging into this new direction is a more interesting, I guess, thing to do. And so I started my version with it. It's also doubling down on cold plunging by being a more politically charged song, and showcases how Kale plays with POV on here, and on the song it almost feels like he's doing a satirical look at somebody whose mind is maybe a little too far gone. And I love Hunting for Witches. I think it's one of the best Bloc Party songs. I love the chopped up sample that acts as the foundation for the beginning of the beat and how the band sort of bleeds in. It's just, I think it's a better starting point than A Song for Clay, personally. And so I start my version with it. Now from there, I do divvy up a little bit, because I think Waiting for the 718, while a great song and follows up the Once and Future King in my version, I think it's a really jarring whiplash from Hunting for Witches, and so I give this sort of like more normal Bloc Party sounding song as a buffer with Once and Future King, a song that I'm kind of shocked was kept off, considering not only is it still also satirical and almost catty, tongue-in-cheek kind of style track looking at being in the music industry, which I think is a very important thing for this band to do, considering how this album was met, fucking critically. But it is also just a bit of a rager. It's got some good guitars, it's got a really nice groove, and it carries the momentum from Hunting for Witches a little better than Waiting for the 718. But Waiting for the 718 does come after that. It's a song that feels a little bit slice of life, while leading into some sounds and some ideas that feel more in the emotional core of Bloc Party sounds that were in Silent Alarm. It's just a nicely constructed, cute sounding little song that I knew I was going to keep, but I was also going to use as a sort of sonic motif planting moment, considering the percussive bells. I'm going to need like a glockenspiel, whatever it is, in the backdrop of this. It's something that every time I've spun this record, I thought should have been a little more of a sonic presence, and it's on one of the B-sides. So it's got like a stylistic purpose on top of being a really good song in my version. But I like Waiting for the 718. I think it's a good track that again just kind of felt a little out of place in the original. So I give it a little shimmy. It's in the same spot in the track listing, but I just gave everything around it a little bit of a shimmy to make it fit a little more comfortably in the track listing. Now, from there, I do have a bit of a through line. There's sort of like a carrying narrative through the next handful of songs that dips into the worlds of observing modern-day London, interjected with one's own personal POV in their relationships. Because from there, I go to Uniform, a song that sort of feels like a lyrical continuation of that, like you're waiting for the 718 while observing the youth in uniform and making observations about them before going back to one's own home with Rhododendrons. Two songs that kind of like help sustain some of the energy and push and pull of vibes from 718 with this evolving eruption that goes across Uniform that goes into a much more like smooth, if not like still subdued groove of Rhododendrons. Something that gives way to the dramatic openings of A Song for Clay, which finally comes in at my point in the track listing. It feels like a point where the tension or underlying underbelly of the last couple tracks really comes to a nice sonic head too, and something that I carry the energy from in a similar way to what Hunting for Witches did on the original, but with, again, a little more of like what people have known Bloc Party for from Silent Alarm, just expanded, with another B-side coming in, Cavaliers and Roundheads. I think Rhododendrons and Cavaliers and Roundheads are two more kind of shocking B-sides that were left on the cutting room floor, considering they're both really strong tunes that help, again, keep the sonics people may have been wanting more of, a bit more of the heart of the project. Cavaliers and Roundheads almost feels like a continuation of some of the mindset from Hunting for Witches 2 in a way that turns it into more of the sort of romantic emotional side of the lyrics. Again, it sort of feels like it's written from a satirical POV, and I think it's a good follow-up from A Song for Clay in that regards as well. But I wanted to keep that sort of push and pull in the emotions, the core, for the next stretch, with Flux coming after Cavaliers and Roundheads. Now, Flux in general is an interesting piece of Bloc Party's discography, because it was originally just a B-side for A Weekend in the City, and then I guess because fan love of the song is so great, which is understandable, it's a banger of a tune that I think perfectly puts their relationship-driven, emotional side of their lyrics with their electronic leaning they were wanting to do throughout this era together harmoniously. It was also a song that on some DSP releases was melded in with 4, which is kind of shocking. But it's a song that I kept in my version of A Weekend in the City because it is a really good song. And I think that as far as like being the end of this like stretch of kind of melding looks at the world with the relationship and this sort of POV of a guy who's not living the best life. It's a nice sort of like punctuation to that stretch before going into more broader topics for a handful of songs with Kreuzberg, Where Is Home in version 2.0 coming after that. Kreuzberg sort of washing in from the electronic energies to be more like a mood piece about the now, and has this really lovely crescendo, while the lyrics sort of start as this observation of relationships before pivoting out. It's like a transitional song in and of itself lyrically that I use for that purpose, because Where Is Home is a much more like serious song talking about how Kayleigh feels kind of like ostracized from his world. It's very much a feeling of confliction where he as a black man feels like he doesn't have a home in London. And I think that it's a song that while sonically kind of leans into the dramatic sides in a way that I could see some may seeing as detracting, I think helps enrich the emotions behind the lyrics in a really strong way. Crank up the energy as the song kind of like builds up after the dramatics give way to a really nice groove that the band rides, something that picks up even more on version 2.0 after that. That feels a bit more on the nose. It's very much like an observation of youth culture once again in the broader senses. And from there, I very much wanted to end the album relatively similarly to how it ends originally. The only difference is I add one more B-side with Selfish Son. Song to sort of set the mood for the last 3 tracks, which I kept in their place. I Still Remember Sunday and Srxt. Selfish Son being the payoff to the Glockenspiel thing I mentioned earlier in the video. It's a song that's very much Glockenspiel forward, but has an attitude about it that almost feels like it's written in that same kind of like dramatic mindset that was more the present point on like Rhododendrons or Cavaliers and Roundheads. It's an interesting sort of like dichotomy of vibes and sonics that I think helps sort of set a stage for the last 3 tracks, because it has that same sort of like critical edge to its lyrics towards the partner that I think is driven home with its inclusion here, because I still remember in Sunday, and in particular very much feel indebted to remembering a partner when they were better in your life, but with a much more look at sweeping guitars and reverb-soaked ideas, and not so much a driving groove, as was the point for a lot of the album. Not to say that it's bad. I think that it's a really strong close for this album. I just kind of feel like the original version has a whole lot of that and loses sight of a lot of the earlier themes that I wanted to sort of sprinkle in through this back half to help make it feel like a more full experience. And I originally wasn't even going to break up the end of the album this much, but I felt like because I wanted to space out these themes again throughout the entire track listing, I knew I had to, even if Kreuzberg does fit nicely before I Still Remember in the original track listing. I think I Still Remember Sunday and Srxt are a fantastic closeout to this, each of them having this wash-in build up to a nice sort of climax song structure-wise, but paired together so fantastically. They all kind of like similarly to what I tried to do with Waiting for the 718 through Flux, sort of have this all kind of feeling like a flow POV in a story sort of sense. And so I kind of kept them all, I kept them in that place for that reason, and they are what closes out my version of A Weekend in the City, and that is my version of A Weekend in the City. Would you like to listen to it? Linked in the description are a YouTube and Apple Music link, along with the track listing laid out if you want to get a look at that as well. If you liked this video, give it a like. If you want to see more, consider subscribing. I drop 2 to 4 vids a week, depending on what I've got going on. This weekend, I'm going to try and finally get the second piece of Yu-Gi-Oh! Finished so that I can start working on the third piece. Because this playthrough is a lot longer than I ever originally intended for it to be. But I hope that you enjoy that nonetheless. I've been Viral Rack. You guys have good days, lots of situations. Take care, and I'll see you another day.